a lot of this business to artists is out hustling, right? Like you have to outwork and you have to work harder than the next. Yeah. But a lot of it is just being prepared and continuing that work. And so, and then when stars align and it's serendipitous and you get to this moment, you get to the song, it's the right place, the right time. We knew the Beyonce record was coming. We knew Shaboozey would potentially be on that record. We didn't know if it was one. We didn't know if it was two. We didn't know if it was any, right? Up until that. And so having already a framework, and this is how I describe it to artists, is like we build frameworks. It's not, I don't call them plans because we pivot very quickly.
What's going on? Welcome to the New Music Business. I'm your host, Ari Herstand, author of How to Make It in the New Music Business, the book. 3rd edition, all formats, ebook, audiobook, hardcover, however you like to consume books. It's out now. You can find it wherever you find books. Today, my guest is Heather Vassar. She is Senior Vice President at Empire. Empire is a fully independent record label, publishing company, distributor. And today we talk about Shaboozey, a bar song, Tipsy. Now, this song has broken all the records. It is currently number one on the Billboard Hot 100 charts and has been for the past 19 weeks as I'm recording this today. 19 weeks, that is the longest that any song has been at the top of the Billboard Hot 100. Maybe it'll go to 20. By the time you're listening to this, you'll know what the history has actually been. So we talk about this song. Heather worked with Shaboozey to put this song out, this album out. And we spent the majority of the conversation discussing how this song became such a massive global hit and stayed there for so long. A lot of songs come and go. They top the charts. They fall off the charts. This one has staying power. We talk about the whole journey of from signing Shaboozey, putting the initial singles out, to then putting out a bar song, of course, to then putting out the full album. We talk a little bit about his cuts with Beyonce. He is on Beyonce's new album, Cowboy Carter, or the latest, I should say. The whole journey from Shaboozey in the past year and how this rocket ship has just taken off with this song. Heather, before she was at Empire, she was at Universal Nashville. And so we talk about the difference between kind of working at a major label to then coming over to this independent label and how all that, the differences between the two. We talk about the deal structures a little bit, ownership model, how the industry has shifted a little bit, even over the past 5 years from what we've seen from the majors to the indies, and how the market has gotten way more competitive and how the deals are now structured differently. It was a great conversation. She was super transparent. She has endless amounts of wisdom. I learned a ton doing this. And then, sometimes we talk to super independent artists that are just getting going, figuring out, make it work and having a moment. And today, this conversation revolves around the biggest song in the entire world right now and has been for the past few months. Longtime listeners, you get both ends of the spectrum here, and I love that. And I appreciate hearing from Heather, breaking it all down for us. And it's so cool to see that a song put out by an independent label is number one. It's the biggest song in the world. You can find Empire Records everywhere. Empire, well, that was a movie. You can find Empire Music, I should say, if you want to check out the website. You can find them on all the socials. You can find Heather on the socials at H Vassar, Vassar. Of course, you can find Shaboozey everywhere. Just go to a mall and you'll hear the song. You can find all of us that make the show happen at Ari's Take on the socials. You can find me at Ari Herstand on Instagram if you want to shoot me a DM. Visit aristake.com, get on the email list. That's where you're going to get the most up-to-date, relevant information about the new music business. aristake.com, sign up for that email list. We'll let you know when new episodes come and just send you some important info. But right now, if you wouldn't mind just pausing this, leave us a 5-star review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Give us a thumbs up on YouTube. Hit the subscribe button. Hit the follow button. If you want us to keep showing up in your feeds, stay in touch with us. All right, let's kick into the show. Heather Vassar, welcome to the show.
Hi, how are you?
Doing great. Probably not as well as you're doing right now. You've had quite the 19 weeks slash year, I know. And but also did I see you were just at the CMAs last week? How was that?
Just at the CMAs. Yeah, we were nominated for 2. And so we had a party there and then also threw a big after party after that. So I was tired at the end of the week, but I'm now doing really well. So now, as of yesterday, after 19 weeks, I'm doing really well. So
yeah. I mean, this is quite a milestone, being the longest running #1 Hot 100 song of all time, tied, I guess. We'll see what next week brings. But that's pretty incredible. Yeah, fingers crossed. I'm with you on this.
All of them are crossed.
Yeah. But I mean, either way, it's I would love to just kind of step back a little bit and for people that don't really know what Empire is, this company, from my understanding, it's fully independent. It's not a major label, and for an independent label, music company, umbrella company, whatever, I'll let you explain what it is in a second, distributor, all that. But for an independent company to have a #1 Hot 100 for so long, I mean, just in general, that's impressive. But I'm curious, just to give us some context, what is Empire? Break it down for us.
Yeah. And Empire is a 100% solely owned independent record label, distribution, and publishing company. So I joined them. They've been around, I think they're in their 15th year. And in December, I'll hit my 5th year. So
amazing.
So I joined at the end of 2019. I left Universal and moved to a solely, fully independent. There's, no ties to a major or anything. And so it's a pretty monumental year off of that.
Yeah. So you said you moved from Universal, and Universal, Universal is a major. It is a massive, the largest music company in the world. What were you doing at Universal specifically? Were you part of they have tons of sub labels, publishing companies, all of that?
Yeah, I was on the label side. I was at Universal Nashville, and was running strategy and research in my last couple years there. And then prior to that, I was in digital marketing there. So,
nice.
Yeah.
Cool. So, with Empire, Empire historically, traditionally, is kind of been a hip hop leaning label, publishing company. I think that's the reputation out there. And when they brought you on, what was the intention? I don't think they had did they have a Nashville division or no? Okay. So that's kind of what you were starting as.
Yeah. There was no sort of division. They had a couple country artists that they had signed, prior to me coming over. And it really was to invest in the town, invest in the artist and genre, and start something here. So when I left Universal, it really was to start to put boots on the ground here and start developing within country music for Empire.
Cool. Okay, so country music was the focus, because I know Nashville, everyone, definitely has a reputation as the country town, but I know there's a lot of other music there that thrives in Nashville.
Yeah.
But specifically country was the direction. Was there a reason that they wanted to expand into country music more intentionally, I suppose, by opening the Nashville division back in 2019?
Yeah, it was sort of off the heels of Kane Brown's success, and how he was moving digitally. And so I think it was starting to see the success of how artists were starting to move that took a more digital approach rather than a more traditional approach.
Cool.
And so our focus it's not necessarily, I don't have to sign a country artist. We actually have several pop, and we have several singer-songwriter, and but because of Nashville being what it is, we skew a little bit more towards the country side. And then obviously, because that's been a lot of my background is in country music. And so that it was just kind of very innately and naturally kind of that's where the flow took us. And so
I feel like I read somewhere that after you retired your softball career, you were a songwriter, and you moved to Nashville, and you were singing and songwriting. Is that right?
I was. After I did retire my softball career, I grew up playing ball. Like that's what I thought I would do. And then in college, I was like, these 4 a.m. workouts are not for me. This isn't it. And so I picked up a guitar, and I was like, oh shit, I can play this, you know, and I was playing by ear, and then I picked up piano, and I was like, you know, my family was looking at me like I was absolutely nuts because they were like, what? Like, how do you know how to do this? And I was like, I just, you know, I could hear a song and play it. And I've always been, I was like so attuned to music in general. It's always been so moving for me. And, you know, I can remember early on, I could hear a commercial or a jingle once, and then I would just be singing it the rest of the day. And my mom would be like, what is going on? So I've always really loved it. And so then when I had a little bit more time on my hands and I started picking up instruments, I ended up getting approval that my music classes at a junior college could go towards my college credit. And so at the undergrad that I was at. And so I just kind of dove into that world and took songwriting classes and just have such a, like, that creative side of my brain as I like loved and I really like kind of thrived in and just sort of fell into then becoming an artist because, you know, my family was like, well, you're writing these songs, like you should sing them. And I was like, absolutely not. That sounds awful. That's not, you know, but I ended up doing that a little bit, but that's what brought me to Nashville was to be on the songwriting side and to write and be in the studio. And I was just like, this is it. Like, I have made it. This is it. Yeah. And then I was never more poor. I always say that. I was like, I didn't make any money. And I was like, I don't know who makes money in this business, but it is certainly not me in my mediocre songwriting era.
Sure.
So, that is a very quick way then to say that I ended up in grad school here in Nashville. And while I was in grad school, I started working at I started working at Universal. So gotcha. That was how I made the transition from artist and writer to label executive. So
that's great. And, you know, it is, I always appreciate hearing when executives began as songwriters or musicians or artists or in some capacity. So you at least have a bit of that empathy and that you can relate to the artists and the songwriters and understanding, like, I mean, you've never been more poor. Most artists and songwriters out there that are doing it, you know, just kind of suffer through that. And it's just like, well, I'm doing what I love and I'm going to hopefully somehow someday make this work. So, you know, at least it's nice that you are able to connect on that level and at least have that empathy because you went through that a little bit. Yeah, honestly, that's the perfect word. And that's actually the word that I use is empathy, because it has made me far more empathetic of being a creative within myself. I don't often get to live and breathe in that space, but I love it. And so it does make me more empathetic towards that creative, even just the creative energies, the creative patterns. I understand of, like, you know, when you're in the final pushes of making the record and when you're in the final pushes of any sort of creative space, of what that takes, what parts of your brain you have to shut off and what that takes to not compromise the art and the craft in that. And so being able to be like empathetic towards it, but also provide that space to then, because I know at the end of that, like the art that comes from that could be monumental and life-changing. And so it's like, and it could be something that's never been done. And it's like, yeah, we should hold that space for that, especially as the artists are within that realm. It's such a beautiful, chaotic thing. Yeah, so. I love that. No, absolutely. That's great. Let's talk Shaboozey, shall we? Sure. And specifically, I mean, we can talk about kind of your history a little bit, but a bar song, Tipsy, and for those listening that don't know, this song, famously, it is Dodgers third baseman Max Muncy's walk-up song. That's how we know it in LA. I'm just kidding. Here in LA, we're still hung up on our World Series win. You're not going to take that. We're gonna live on that for a little while. I'm just kidding.
I relate to that on so many levels, from the athlete level to I did go to a Dodger game before the World Series. I went to a game, and it's always, you know, it's never. I will say, as many times as I've heard that song, and for as long as I've heard that song this entire year, you know, because I heard it at the Grammys before this shit was out. And you know, you hear it all the time, and it never gets old being in a space that you don't anticipate hearing it. And so when it was his walk-up song, I'm still videoing it. It's me. I'm getting my phone out, and I'm like trying to capture it. I'm like, look how cool this is, you know. So
I mean, honestly. like, I think that's how I discovered the song, or maybe how I first heard this, because I'm a huge Dodger fan, and I watch most of the games on TV. I'm that guy.
Wow.
And I, no, I know.
Okay.
And my wife is an incredible sport. Let me tell you, she puts up with that at home during Dodger season. But you start to like tap into their walk up songs, and then of course going to the game and you hear it, and it's but then then it's everywhere, of course. So let's talk about the journey. I mean, either talk about Shaboozey maybe, and just kind of like how you started working with him, and then how it led to this song. But now it's the album, of course, this year. But all of that.
Yeah. I met Shaboozey after I left Universal. It was probably March of 2020. That probably a little bit before that, received a SoundCloud link, and was kind of like, this is cool. And there are songs that have never even been out. Some we've released, and some, never been released before. But when I heard it, I was like, man, this is cool. This is different. And it was very much kind of in the vein that, like, we sit a little left of center of like country music. And there was the music in this there was some hip hop, and then there was some rock, and there was some like just pop sound. And I was like, man, this is in a more cohesive format. Like, this could be really special. And so flew to LA, met him there. And so, and again, this was like right at COVID time. And so LA was very different than Nashville was during that time. And so, but met with him and a couple of his team members, and just kind of got to hear him speak and hear him talk about the world that he wanted to build. And he was so intentional in that conversation. And I remember I was just telling one of his managers, like, I still have a manila envelope of a movie script, like a film that he's written, that he was like, this is what this is. And I was like, wow, this, like, he is a creative, like just a true creative in that. And his convictions were so strong at the time. And him and I have really kind of grown together through this process, because at the time I didn't really know what to do. I didn't know how much of a gift those core convictions were and still are, and how much those would attune to then what I look for in other artists. And so even just talking to him, he understood and knew the world that he wanted to build, that he wanted fans to experience, that he wanted to invite us into. And so from the jump, that's how he spoke about this process. And so we started working with him, released the first song with us was Beverly Hills. It had a bit of a viral moment, and I was like, oh, this is okay. It lived in both worlds. He's very authentically country, and he's 6'5" Nigerian descent Black man. And so it's just like, this is really cool. And the things that he was talking about sonically fit in so many different worlds. It fit in hip hop, it fit in Americana, it fit in country. And it was like, this is brand new. This isn't something, we're not pulling this from other sources of what other artists are doing. This is his sound.
Now he had previously had a record deal with Republic, right? And released a full album. So, when he came to you, I guess, what was that conversation of just like, how would you differentiate from Republic, and how did that go for him? And like, what headspace was he in coming off of that deal and that record and all of that? Was there a departure from sound he wanted, or just a different workflow, or like, what was that process like to go?
I honestly, I think it was a little of all of that, right? It was a fresh start within wanting to move more into the country space, wanting the country within him that's authentic to then be like that, to be felt and that to be seen within the art, within the creative. As far as kind of his headspace of just providing him the framework to then run within the lane that he wants to run in, right? Is providing the support, the backing, the ideation off of that. I think being able to provide that, be like, this is yours and this is yours to run. And I think having that freedom really allowed him to flourish within that of like, how do you see this going? How do you want this to go? How does this feel like it should go? Because he has it within him. He is well ahead, even in steps of like kind of how he sees this. And a lot of the artists that I work with are, that's why, they end up being independent. And so I think being able to operate at the absolute highest level, history making, legendary status, while also while being independent, owning your records, and doing that at such a level and being in control of that is such a beautiful thing. And I think that's only going to become more and more.
Yeah, so I'm curious. You mentioned it briefly, but owning your own records. Talk to me about the difference between what an Empire deal looks like versus like a Universal Republic or Universal Nashville or any other major label record deal looks like.
Yeah, I think earlier on when I got in the independent space, I think the deals looked very, very different. I think now they start to blend a little bit now that the majors are kind of starting to shapeshift a little of having to within what it ends up being licensing deals. We take no ownership and are just licensing deals, not even just, but we call them partnerships because that's what that is, right? It is a partnership. We just provide the, not to get in stuffy terms, but we like to be the advisors, like board of directors, as the artist is CEO. And we really treat it that way. And that's how we operate. It's kind of like we're the navigation of, we do this day in and day out. I'm doing this across multiple artists. Our team is talking to Spotify and TikTok and all of the platforms and Apple, and we have great relationships with them. And we're seeing what's working on each individual platform. And we're able to take that expertise back to the artist so that they feel like they have the best knowledge to make the best decision within their business, right? And I think that's what it is. It's not taking a cookie cutter approach. There was a lot of times I would get frustrated in the major system. It was like, here's the little square, fit in this, and you can only release during this time, right? And I think that some of that still exists. I think some of that's having to evolve. I think we're pushing a lot of that, of going it's evolving because of we're able to provide a runway and backing and support and expertise then for the artist to go, okay, I feel like I have all the information I need to make the best decision for what fits within my business. It's helping them build that as a partner rather than them it being some sort of dictatorship within how it's structured.
No, for sure. And I mean, the fact that you have the resources and the infrastructure, or it seems like you have it, and I'm curious if you wouldn't mind just kind of breaking it down a little bit further. I mean, specifically, we could fast forward in the Shaboozey story, and then we can jump back, and we can jump chronologically. We got some time here, but the fact that
this is your show, Ari.
The fact that Bar Song Tipsy debuted on the Hot 100, and it debuted at top, I think it was number 11 or something on the country charts, or like for an indie that previously is like unheard of. I'm curious, leading up to that, how did you do that? Like, how do you bust through as an indie, breaking through all the charts, having not just on streaming, because it's one thing to get populated in a few streaming, editorials, and boom, you're at a few million. Cool. It's another thing to have a viral moment on TikTok and all right, you're busting through there, but to hit everywhere all at once and start charting on the Hot 100, how does that happen?
Yeah, I think it's a few things, right?
Okay.
We would have to take it a little bit further step back we were already in album release cycle. So we had dropped Let It Burn in October. We had set the album date by January, February. By the time we got to Grammys, we had sort of set the album date. Now, we didn't have a Bar Song. He wrote it in January. So we had had what we thought was the album. We had dropped a couple other songs. We had dropped Vegas. We had dropped Annabelle. So we were already within the release cycle. And I say that a lot of this business to artists is out hustling, right? You have to outwork and you have to work harder than the next. But a lot of it is just being prepared and continuing that work. And so, and then when stars align and it's serendipitous and you get to this moment, you get to the song, it's the right place, the right time. We knew the Beyonce record was coming. We knew Shaboozey would potentially be on that record. We didn't know if it was one. We didn't know if it was two. We didn't know if it was any, right? Up until that. And so having already a framework, and this is how I describe it to artists, is like we build frameworks. It's not, I don't call them plans, because we pivot very quickly. We're super nimble when something starts to move. So because we were already building, we had already had momentum, right? And then we had already even had momentum once we started teasing the song. So we start teasing the song and it's like moving, and we're like, okay, like what we felt within our gut was like, yeah, this is transpiring what we had anticipated. And so because that's moving, we pushed the song back 2 weeks from release date when we found out of Beyonce's record. And so that's what I say of like, Boozy was prepared, right? He was already working. We were already in this momentum and in this cycle that by the time we then dropped the record, we had 3 other tracks out. He had been on 2 records on the Beyonce project. So we were talking about that. And then that led us into an absolute smash hit. So again, it's sort of it's unprecedented because it took it was that process and framework to get there, and then being able to be nimble enough of going like, yeah, we had the album done, or so we thought. Yeah. And then we're hearing this song, we're like, oh man, this is great, right? Like when it was like, I'm listening to it on a cell phone at Grammys, and they're like, do you think country radio would play this? That was the very first question I was asked. And I was like, here's the deal. It's a great record. I don't know. I don't know if country radio is there yet. I would like to think so. I would like to think that we've evolved and we get there, and with Jay Quan on it, the interpolation of that, I didn't know. And so that was a very real answer of like, we're going to have to show them with fans and just listenership and where the song goes of why they should play it. Because it's not something that country radio would just sort of flip on.
How does country radio work? And is it different from pop radio, hip hop, rock, adult contemporary, AAA? I mean, how does country radio work?
Yeah, it's a little bit different of a beast because there's so many different reporting stations rather than it's not all of it's consolidated like the other formats. And so we took our team took a really streamlined approach to work it across across those formats that you just named, right? All at the same time, which is unheard of. That also plays in to the success of the record, is because it is a genre bending record where we can get success at pop radio and at rhythmic and at hot AC and also at country. So we're playing in so many different worlds, but country radio is a bit of a different beast because there's 276 reporting stations. There's, and so it's not all consolidated, and it's still very relationship based. They want to meet the artist. They want to do that as well. And so they're not apt to jump on with a quote unquote new artist right out of the gate because they're like, we don't is he country? Is this country? And so that was some of we knew that we would be having that conversation to introduce him as we went through the release plan.
Cool. And as you went through the release plan, I mean, those first 3 singles that you released, were you pitching those at country radio, or were you kind of waiting?
No, our approach is not radio first across any format. Ours is we build it digitally first. That's the kind of consumer era that we're in and space. And, I'd say this quite a bit is a lot of the platforms and TikTok to Spotify, they're algorithms, right? And so if you build the demand of our goal is to build one fan at a time, right? Because then that's who buys tickets to shows, that's who buys merch. That's the goal. As soon as the goal starts to be of country radio to, a playlist, ad, whatever that is. And yes, we want all of that. But at the end of the day, it ends up being that transpires, that comes when you're building the story, when you're telling the narrative authentically, and when the artist, and also when the music resonates, right? And so we don't take a radio first approach within our business model because we believe in building it within the culture, and the culture then will dictate the kind of the outcome of where then it's playlisted and played and added. So
Gotcha. And so with a bar song, well, first off, you said you were already started the album cycle. Why was he still writing? I mean, usually like when
Always,
artists
always,
always
always.
he's just
Yeah, always. I mean, he genuinely is a true creative. I have,
cool.
artists are. There's a lot of artists that are different, where they'll just write for the album. Then once they finish that, then they'll be done.
Yeah.
That's not his approach. He is
Okay.
constantly writing within that.
Cool.
And then and so every artist is a little bit different, as you know, of just where they how they kind of approach things. And so he's constantly being
Yeah.
creative in some way.
It wasn't something where he turned in the album and, Team Record Label, Team Empire, Team Heather was like, we don't hear a hit. Get back in that studio
No.
and bring me a hit. No,
No,
okay.
no. It's not
Yeah.
it's certainly not how we operate. I mean, we'll say of like, hey, I think we need another one, but it's very collaborative conversation of, if he's like, this is here and done. But he's far more of a perfectionist in that, of that space. He knew he was missing something. And he had this idea of interpolating like flipping a record before he got to this one. And so that idea had been in the back of his head for a minute. And so when they went in to write, that's where they were taking that session. I think too, I mean, him, and like I said, there's so many artists that I work with that they always try and outwrite the next one. The last one that they did, they try and outdo that one. And so that's always been their, I say it all the time of like, especially coming from like being an athlete, like I'm highly competitive. And they're also just highly competitive within themselves, right? So they're always trying to outright that last one that they wrote. So it was certainly not, it did not come from us of like, you need one more. So
right. I'm curious with the Jaquan interpolation of his song Tipsy from early 2000s or whenever that was. Was that discussed with him in advance? Was that pre-cleared? Was that something where it was? Yeah, tell me how that went down. Okay.
Yeah. Once, not before the write, obviously we had the song. So they went in, and so once the song was then done, then of course, that's when you get into the, of course, label side of things of clearances, samples, what that needs to look like. And then, so that's when, and a lot of times, we'll get records and we're like, okay, so, I mean, we have an entire departments that's what they help in, and the A&R teams that then they, go to the artists, go to the writers, to start getting it cleared, start negotiating the deals, start negotiating what that looks like. And so that was done well before the song was released. And so,
it's interesting because, I mean, we're starting to see more artists doing that. Famously, like, Olivia Rodrigo did this a few years ago. It was just like, this sounds like it could be a Paramore song, so we're just going to give them some writing on this. And it sounds like a Taylor Swift I'm just going to just avoid any kind of confusion or anything like that. And Taylor Swift did a recent, I mean, like, because I listened to the songs back to back, and I'm like, I don't hear any similarities other than like everybody in the club getting tipsy, everybody in the bar getting tipsy, which is like, it's close, but not that close. And it's like, I guess, there are a lot of songs that sound way more similar to me that don't have the shared writing credit or interpolations or anything like that. I guess, was this a conversation, or what was the conversation that went into this? Did Shaboozey and the team, like the writing team, come to you and be like, okay, we intentionally interpolated Jaquan's, we flipped this one, let's bring him in, that was it? Or was it kind of throughout this process, it's like, this is pretty similar, to avoid any legal complications, let's just clear this? Or
no, I think in this instance, it was very much of like, we flipped this record, we should talk to Jaquan about this. And so,
cool. Okay.
But I mean, even the records that you named of Ariana's and Taylor's, it's all, I think it just depends on the process, right? And once well out of my depth of clearance world and land, it's just having but for us, we like to be like more safe than sorry of getting into any sort of sticky situation. And so, because this was a legitimate, like, hey, we went in the studio and we flipped Tipsy. It was like, we should probably talk to him about that,
Yeah. You don't want another.
It wasn't a big ongoing kind of conversation in that regard. It was like, that's what we should do.
Yeah, and right, you don't want another blurred line situation where clearly Pharrell and Robin Thicke, reference the Marvin Gaye track in the studio, but they're like, this is different. Blah blah blah. We know how that ended with multi-million-dollar lawsuit awarded. So I think there's a different mentality shift later on. But okay, so getting back to it, so they're writing this. They wrote the song even during the album campaign. You're at the Grammys. You're hearing it through an iPhone. And like, will country radio play this? Maybe, maybe not. I'm not sure. Then Beyonce drops Cowboy Carter, and it turns out Shaboozey is on a couple tracks. How did that change the album rollout? And then with A Bar Song, where did that fit into all of this?
Yeah. I mean, really, like I said, album date stayed the same. Our plan didn't really change. We moved A Bar Song back 2 weeks. The week that hers dropped was the week that we were going to drop our song. We didn't want to obviously convolute that. So we pushed it a couple weeks to give space to those records and also just strategically that builds the algorithm, right? We knew that her listeners would then be attracted to his pages and so it was kind of like, let's give that a couple weeks and we had already been teasing it. And so it was already moving in a way that it didn't take long but album date stayed the same. We knew we were dropping at the end of May. And really that was then to roll into CMA Fest and have that out for CMA Fest and things like that. So
when you say it was already moving, break that down. What does that mean?
Yeah, sorry, that was very industry terms.
Speak.
Yeah, sorry. I don't even know I do it, so I appreciate you. I appreciate you calling it out. We were already seeing engagement on TikTok. We were seeing engagement on, with a little bit that we teased out. There's even some dark ads of what we ran and advertising of like the engagement and was really high on it.
And dark ads, just to clarify, are little video clips that you run on maybe Instagram ads or something like that are not publicly posted to his profile, but they will show up on people's feeds. And it was essentially maybe like what the similar to the TikTok post that you were posting, just teasing the song, something like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
A lot of A/B testing of like what content is also resonating. Of like, is it his face? Is he in it at all? Is it just lyrics? Kind of like A/B testing a lot of different avenues to see. And so there was already engagement there. We had also seen a lot of like. I was talking to a good friend at Spotify, and before it was even before the public even heard the Beyonce project, they're sitting in the meeting listening to the Beyonce, like Cowboy Carter record. And they all, somebody on the team was like, that's Shaboozey. And so even just his voice, just sonically of knowing and building into that, we were already getting some of that of like, is Shaboozey on this record? And you're just like,
right, because they keep that very close to the chest. I mean, we had Kevin Garrett on the show, and he famously wrote the first track off of Lemonade on Beyonce's album. And he told me he didn't even know he was going to be on the record until it was released, until they dropped it. And then he's learning it just like everyone else that he's on the record. It's just pretty wild.
It was wild. Late Monday. It was I think it was like 9 p.m. Monday. I just get a text that was like, yes, that was it. And you're like,
that's wild.
And then Wednesday, the track listing, but with, we didn't know. We didn't know at the time it was going to be 2. We knew how many, he had written, how, him going in the studio. And then Wednesday, the track listing is announced, and Friday, the record drops. And so it really is that fast. So it was sort of a, hey, here's plan A if it happens, and here's plan B if it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And so it's being, like I said, that just goes back to being able to be nimble of like whatever works best for the artist, whatever serves the artist best within the capacity of their business is always the path that we want to take, because I tell artists this all the time. It's not me on stage. It's not my face. It's not my name. It's you. And so it has to be authentic. It has to be what feels right to you and your business, because that's what's going to work at the end of the day. And so that's what we try and stick to. And so it's like, okay, here's your A and B plan that hopefully, like feels right to you. Sit with that, live with that. And then it's like, okay, then we can just pivot, or stay and we're off to the races, right? Either way.
Yeah. So the song was starting to, you were testing this, you're A/Bing it, running the dark ads, getting engagement on TikTok, just people were resonating. You're seeing that this like, okay, this could be something. Beyonce album comes out. He's on 2 tracks. So you mentioned you're not radio first, but did you go to radio before the song was even released? No, you didn't.
No.
Okay.
No, we didn't go to radio until a month after release.
So when it started charting on Hot 100, explain to me how these Billboard charts work. Like, how does that even happen? How do you chart on any Billboard chart?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's consumption, right? And so it's a formulaic of download streams and across the board, and then it's also by genre. So there's so many different charts, so many different like avenues to chart. The Billboard, country chart, the top songs chart. So it really just kind of depends on kind of what chart we're talking about, but it's all formulaic within that. And so we had consumption. Again, and it's all really leading into just of the entire pathway before we got the song out. And we knew probably within like the matter of those 10 days of teasing it, of like, okay, this is coming in hot, right? Like this is, and so, but even still, we didn't take it to radio first, or we didn't service it. And I'll say too, because of country radio, their plan is months in advance, right? Like they have world premieres and all of that planned out well in months in advance. And we are not the months in advance plan, because you can't really plan for something to be that viral out of the gate. Of course, you hope that's the case with all of the setup and with all of the, the lead time and everything we had. But at the same time, it's better, or I'll say it feels a healthier business model to then have radio coming to you to be like, can we play this record? And so that's what it was. The demand was really building, and we were like, we know we need to go to radio. And I had every label calling me. Can we work this record? Can we have this record? Can we do this with you? Right. And we kind of laugh now. We're like, no. Like, no, we're good. We got it. It's a little bit of that of like, no. It's okay. We got it.
What was the sales pitch there? I mean, isn't that a little insulting, or was it kind of, I mean, was it like, oh, you little people on your cute little indie can't handle this. Let the big boys do it for you, or what? Like,
yeah, I mean, it's sort of how it feels,
right.
It's funny. I was just saying this earlier. I have always operated with a bit of a chip on my shoulder, just in life in general. And so I'm like, we can do it, and having been building the Nashville division for, at the time was 4.5 years. And so I was like, no, we can do this. And of course, with my CEO, Gazi, who owns Empire's founder and CEO, it's a lot of conversation with him of kind of like, how do you want this to roll? Here's where I'm at. Here's where I think we should go. But like at the end of the day, it's definitely like, I mean, it's his world. And so it's it's a lot of sitting with him and also him having been proactively putting team members in place on a global level to then be able to take such a record and really just make it what it is. And so we've always taken, I think we can talk about country radio and we can talk about even, pop radio. We can talk about all of these like singular things, but I think at the end of the day, we take such a global approach that, we had them in Germany filming Vegas, for Colors well before well before Tipsy dropped, right?
The
And
YouTube
so
series, Colors, yeah.
we've always taken taken a very global approach in that and introducing him to the world, because music is at a global level, and that's how fans consume it, right? We're hopping from playlist to playlist and different genre to different genre. So it's like, why not like advertise and market it that way at that level within what makes sense? And so within that, and every country radio plays into that. And so, but if we built the demand there, then it's very easily to supply that, right?
Yeah. Do you have in-house radio divisions, playlist divisions? I mean, like what in-house departments do you have at Empire versus what do you outsource to third parties?
We have everything is in-house. Now we work with some like contractors and consultants, and we work with our partner Magnolia within the country radio space. We work with them with Randy Hauser. And so
what is Magnolia? What is that?
A radio promotion.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And so we work with them on their Magnolias, who worked with us within like the country space. They're also working Highway, which is Shaboozey's next country radio single. Cool. But we have, as far as, sort of divisions, is we're what I call completely like de-siloed, right? So I'm on the same calls that our like head of Africa is, that our head of like our WANA division. I know what's coming out of Asia. So we're on all of the same A&R and marketing calls and getting feedback as well. As that's what makes this highly collaborative, which is the biggest difference. And so we have in-house from design, merch, physical, across the board. It's all in-house at a global level. And so if we need something shot, if we need creative done, if we need, somebody's talking in, we have our team in Australia, and they're talking to Apple and Spotify there, and Pandora, and that all of the partners, to making sure that they also have that relationship. And then as well as like international radio, BBC and those things. So it's like having the full team within our team has made it so seamlessly achievable.
I mean, the amount of infrastructure that you have, I mean, it sounds almost like a major, well, at least in the sense that it's just such a big company versus, we've had Sub Pop on and Partisan Records on and Rope-A-Dope Records on and Coal Mine Records, and I just like the 4 indies that I just listed, span the gamut of like, a 4 or 5 person operation to like a 60 person operation that had been around since Nirvana to, I mean, Empire sounds massive in comparison. I mean, how many people are at Empire? What kind of organization is this?
Yeah, it's funny. I think I was employee 43 or something like that.
Okay.
And now we are 250 plus. That's out of my realm completely.
Incredible.
And so
just in the last 5 years, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Really through like post-COVID, like through COVID and then post-COVID in the last, we've grown exponentially. And so so when when I have the majors calling and I'm like, we're good. We got it.
Yeah.
Because I think to your point though, that we were sort of the ones flying under the radar. I always say like work in the dark, and that's what we do. We work quietly and we work in the dark and until you're, until you can't be hidden anymore. And so that's sort of kind of how this is like just been hustling in the dark and hustling in the quiet a little bit to build this. A lot of people, especially within the Nashville division, we've made history in some sort of capacity every year that I've been here. And so to be able to do that, those are kind of like, okay, we've got to win. We got to win. We got to win. And so having those other wins leading into then this one was such a great picture of success and just such has been a really beautiful thing to like, just, feel really grateful for it. And then at the same time of like, okay, like, it was literally, we had dropped a bar song and like I said, in April, and then I saw Ghazi and Shaboozey at ACM week in Dallas. And, when I left Universal to come to Empire, I think I said, like, I told Ghazi, like, give me 5 years, like invest in this for 5 years. Like if you're only here for a couple years, like, I can't make this jump. Like, this is my career. And so when I saw them at ACM week out there, I looked right at them and I was like, you told me 5 and I did it in 4.5. Like,
wow.
we did it in 4.5. And he was like, you did, you know, such a like really serendipitous like moment of like, okay, you know, okay, like this is
cool.
So much of the grind and so much of this side of the business is, you know, you can sort of get lost in it a little bit of the daily. And then, you know, I just thought I was busy then and now.
Well, yeah. So tell me, like, after now that, you know, the song has been out and it's becoming a hit, it clearly, you know, resonated from the get-go. Is it just like holding on for dear life? Is there some steering that's happening with this? Is there like, what do you do after, you know, a month after it's out so it doesn't lose momentum like so many songs do? I mean, it could have easily been, you know, song of the summer and it's over. You know, it's fine. That happens all the time and that would have been incredible. You would have made history. But it's, you know, now we're in, you know, coming up to the holidays here. We're going up to December and you're still topping the charts. It's just like, how does that happen?
Yeah. I think it's an intentionality, right? It's even songs from that first album of like still working those records, still talking about even those, because it's about a collective. It is more, it's more than just a song. And I think it will always, I think at the end of the day, it's always about the song. It's always about the songs, but it's about the collective narrative. It's the story. It's who he is. And I think that's kind of what we've been trying to do and what artists try and do all of the time is like get there and to tell their story. They are storytellers. We are storytellers. And so we've just been able to, there's so many layers of him and his life and then within the song and then dropping a project and having songs on that project that are like, if you haven't listened to the album, it's like incredible records. So it's not just a song. And I think that's the difference is when it's not just about a song. Yes, it's the song, right? But then there's so many other stories and collective like narratives within the world to introduce to and to tell that continues the momentum, right? We could get into the semantics of like, what's the advertising approach and things like that. Yes, there's always that strategy within that world. But I think at the end of the day, it's more of just being able to continue to tell the story. Whether that's on the heels of this song or whether that's on, you know, a record like My Fault that we, you know, that Noah Cyrus is on, right? It's being able to continuously tell that. And I think that's the magic. Like when there is a story to tell and continue doing that.
Yeah. And I mean, he's continued to release music. And, you know, there's been some remixes. I mean, I saw the sped up version, which is, you know, hot thing. Like it was, how much of the conversation was, okay, how do we milk this thing? Let's do remix. Let's do the sped up version. Let's do some collabs. I mean, let's do, you know, throw up the instrumental. Let's pop in the original demo. You know, all of that. And then how much of it is like, okay, let's, you know, there's so many other great songs on this album. Let's like start focusing on some of those other ones. Not to mention, he's released a few songs since the album in the same year, which is also wild to me.
Yeah. We just dropped Good News a couple weeks ago now. Yeah, I think.
Yeah.
How I describe it, and again, I say this, whether an artist is just starting out early on to mid to then now, right? I think the proof, I've seen it across the board, right? But it's always a balance. It's a balance of the strategy, algorithmic, gamification approach, right? Content creation, that it's a balance of that within the art, right? Then within the craft of the artist and within the music. And it's always this push and pull, or it's always this teeter-totter of like, of making sure we're not sacrificing the art and the craft and the story while also playing the game, right? And like playing the game at the highest level. So it's always this like constant push and pull tug of like, and it takes a lot of people to have the conversation, right? Of like, having ideas and going even down to like, what's he performing on the CMA Awards last week, and like, how do we do this? And so it's all very thoughtful, but it's all within the realm of what makes sense. And so, but I say that across the board. This isn't Shaboozey specifically. I'm telling my artist CC that right now. And I'm telling, the artist that I'm just signing that right now of like, we can't sacrifice the art. We can't sacrifice the craft. That's the point at the end of the day. And there's a game to play.
Right. And that, I think that is perfectly encapsulated in sped up version, because let's talk about that. There's no art in a sped up version. That is the full game right there. I mean, like, what's the conversation with that when they're like, sped up version, this bullshit. I didn't write it this way. I didn't make the song this way. Why would we do this? It's not for the art.
That is art in and of itself in some capacity. I mean, listen.
Okay.
Sometimes for me, not in this instance, I'll say not in this instance. Sometimes I'm like, oh, that's better. They should have sped that up anyways, like, so I can.
I mean, that's an indication of the times. Like that is full TikTokification of music right there. Like sped up would not exist without TikTok, which to me, if a social media platform is dictating the creation process, that's not art to me. That is like that is when we are giving in to technology and giving in to the powers that be that have nothing to do with the art. So that to me, but everyone does it, and I get it, and that's the game, and that I understand that.
You say that though. I can remember even album 1 with Shaboozey. I was like, you have to post, right? I'm like, please post, and there was only a couple. You'll see, our approach has been very different. And I think you see that with the massive superstars of Adele and these artists that do it very different against the grain of what the social, thing pushes, that beast that it is. And so, yes, I do not, I mean, there are specific artists that even write of like, this is going to do well on TikTok, right? Then that becomes that art form within itself that can be arguable, right? But even within a bar song, the official music video, it's a one scene. It's not this elaborate movie. It's a one scene and it works, right?
Yeah.
And so I think too, a lot of it has to do with the consumers of what, not only what they're used to. I think it has to do with attention span. I think it has to do with swipe culture that we're in. And, it's just, you have to catch them. And so some of that plays into that, of course. I do think some of it's necessary and some of it's not. And again, it truly genuinely is artist and story dependent within that. And so sometimes it's not warranted to have a full-fledged music video, and sometimes it is within where the artist sits. But I do think, especially, the sped up versions and that, that's all, it's all a part of the game. And, I mean, if we go back to it, it's like, how many versions of a song can you release? Where it's like, I think Gail's was like 20 something versions of ABCDEFU, like.
Right. Oh gosh.
And so, that worked. Right. So.
Sure. No, I mean, in every era in the history of the music industry has had something like that. And it's like the unplugged versions, and it's it's whatever is working at the time that feeds into what the market wants or will celebrate or appreciate. So that makes sense.
I think it's about just pushing to the fringes, right? Of whatever that is within, if it's a TikTok approach, if it's a, whatever that ends up being, right? It is pushing to the fringes of not being afraid to, I've had an artist tell me of like, oh, it's just, this corner of the market is so saturated. And I'm like, all corners of the market are saturated. There's never been more music being released.
There's 100,000 songs going up a day. It's saturated.
And the artists and fans have never had this level of accessibility, right? There's such a direct that's also changed the game. And so it's put more pressure on artists in different ways, but I think it's also allowed an accessibility that has allowed artists, especially on an independent landscape, to thrive, not just survive and not just like make some money, but it's like, no, they're thriving in it because they have that direct rapport. And I think because of the TikTok, like because of Reels, because of that world within the digital landscape that we're in, it's also shifting in a way that's made consumer, like fans, people, us, you and I in general, want something more authentic, want that one-to-one.
Yeah.
I think that's where also long form is coming back of like, then they want to know a little bit more, right? So you're seeing more documentaries being done at the same time as more TikToks have never been posted. So
right.
Again, it's just this balancing of like kind of what fits within, and there's never a standard approach that we take, and certainly that I don't take within an artist, because you never know which side, where it's going to kind of need to land.
Yeah.
And that's the creative part on my side of the world, like that's where we get to be creative rather than,
So within that realm, when you're bringing on an artist, what conversations are you having with them like that? I mean, are you having the conversations of, well, you need a TikTok strategy and we're going to have to work on that, or this and that, or like, what are the conversations that you're having with the artist when you're about to sign them? Does that go into the process of like, we're not going to touch them if they don't have a TikTok strategy, or they're not, they don't grasp what that is all about, or how does that all work?
Yeah, I think a lot of what I do is education, right?
Okay.
Is a lot of educating of, hey, this is what I'm seeing working in this realm. This is what I'm seeing working here. It's never we're not going to sign you if you're not going to post on TikTok. For me, again, it all goes back to this song. It goes back to the artist and the artistry and this song. That's why we're in this business. It's like, I got into music because I loved live music. I love going to concerts. I still do. Right.
Yeah.
Now, I'm far more of a critic than I was, 15 years ago. And I see it very differently. And I'm like, oh, that piano player missed that note or whatever. I have far different lens, but that's why I got into music. That's, I get paid to do this. And so I also know I'm super fortunate in that. And at the same time, that allows me to like kind of maintain perspective of, I describe it to artists at the end of the day, because like kind of going full circle back to what we talked about was never more poor. I can relate to that and say, this is money left on the table, right? And I'm cool with that. If you want to leave that money on the table, that's going to be up to you, because again, it's their face and their name. It's their business. Yes, I have a business also to protect and to be responsible for. And so it's not like there's no like responsibility there or, like ability to do that. I'm not going to let something highly jeopardize it. And I also know and have learned just along the way, especially with artists, of like what I'm okay to give on and like what's not worth the fight, because there are so many different avenues because of the accessibility that we can make up for that, right?
Sure.
I think there's never been more pressure on artists than there is now, because it's not just about the music. It is about the content and, being accessible. The
story, like you said.
Yeah, it's the story, but it's also, you have to go film these. I need 75 liners. I need this, right? It's all of those things. Sure. And we need new press images. And so there's so many different demands now that I think that there used to be. And I can say that without having lived in the 70s of like being at the labels then. I have no idea, but it just seems to be a bit of a different game. And so because of that, it's never if you don't post on, TikTok, we're not signing you. It very much is just an education of like, hey, this is converting in this way. This is also from Meta. They're telling us this is what's working well, or what they're about to promote. When are they hitting what's hot button, right?
Yeah.
They're telling us that. And so it's like, if we're not, like, our job is then to educate and also provide a strategy if they don't have one, right? And be like, hey, let's tweak some of this. That's our job. That's our job, to be like, give them the resources, give them the knowledge, and then also provide the help to then help execute if that is what is in line, right? And so it's like, that's the goal. It's like, hey, if we can elevate for me, it's like elevating every single moment across the board and doing that to the best of our ability, right?
Yeah, I love it. No, love that. Well, Heather, it's been such a pleasure chatting with you. I appreciate you dropping so much of your wisdom and just being so transparent with everything. Congratulations again. I have one final question that I ask everyone who comes on the show, and what does it mean to you to make it in the new music business?
To make it, I think there's a part of me that always feels like I'm still trying to make it, right?
Okay.
I don't know that I'll ever feel like, oh, I've made it. I think that's just how I'm wired. Is I tell my team, it's just how I kind of live my life, is like we set the bar and then we reset the bar. Like we set the bar against ourselves. And so to make it, I feel like, I don't know that I'll ever feel that. I feel super grateful. I'm so lucky. I know that what has happened within my career doesn't happen in a lot of people's career. And a lot of people, that work on the business side, they don't get to experience this and may never. And so I do feel super fortunate and really lucky. And like, at the same time, I'm like, I've put in a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, I've earned this, there's a little bit of that, of like soaking it in. And just having, I don't know that we would have that moment if there wasn't that passion along the way either, And so for me, it's like, I think I try and hold so much gratitude for even what I had before this year, right? I remember even getting to January of this year and going like, man, if I walked away from music today, like I would be happy and fulfilled. And then May hit and I thought, I could walk away today and I would be happy and fulfilled. And I think having that peace within that of knowing how hard I work, and it's not something that I like hold too tight to. I'm just really grateful to be in these spaces with these artists and like kind of getting to help change their life, and they're changing mine. It just looks really different. And so just being really grateful for that. And then at the same time, because I am so competitive, I'm like, cool. The bar has been set, and now we break it. So yeah,
I love it.
It's always the chase. It's the hustle.
Amazing. Heather, thank you so much. That was great.
Thank you.
Today's episode was edited by Ari Davids with music by Grassroots District and produced by all the great people at Ari's Take.